Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Today inshallah we will cover a new topic which is humerus bone. This bone is a humerus bone. The word humerus comes from a Latin word humor, which means shoulder. It is located in the arm. Arm is a word which is also called as brachium. And this humerus is the longest bone of the upper limb. See here in this diagram, this is the longest bone of the upper limb. This red colored bone is a humerus bone which is located in the arm or brachium. Proximally, the humerus articulates with the glenoid cavity of the scapula. Okay, this is the glenoid cavity of the scapula to form the shoulder joint. This is glenohumeral or shoulder joint. Distally, it articulates with the head of the radius and the trochlear notch of the ulna at the elbow joint. So it is forming two joints. Proximally, it is forming shoulder joint, and distally it is forming elbow joint. The humerus can be divided into three main regions. See here, this is upper end of the humerus, this is the body or the shaft of the humerus, and this is the lower end of the humerus. The upper end is also called as the proximal extremity. Then this is the body or the shaft, and the lower end is called as the distal extremity. Okay, so the humerus can be divided into three main regions: proximal extremity, shaft or the body, and the distal extremity. First of all, we will discuss the proximal extremity of the humerus bone. There is a head in the humerus. Can you see here? This is the head, which is round, smooth, and the proximal end of the humerus. This head forms about 1/3 of a sphere, and it is oriented medially, superiorly, and slightly posteriorly. It articulates with the glenoid cavity of the scapula to form the glenohumeral joint or the shoulder joint in the shoulder joint complex. See here, there is a greater tubercle on the head of the humerus. This is the head of the humerus, and at the upper end there is the greater tubercle of the humerus, which is a large roughened elevation. This is a large roughened elevation on the lateral proximal end of the humerus. This is the lateral proximal end of the humerus, and it will be lateral to the head. Okay, this head of the humerus will comes medially, and the greater tubercle will comes laterally. Okay, so this is greater tubercle. See here in this diagram, this is greater tubercle of the humerus. This is the anterior view or the anterior face of the humerus, and this is the posterior view or the posterior face of the humerus. Okay, so this blue colored is greater tubercle of the humerus, which will come laterally, and the head of the humerus will comes medially. Now, this is greater tubercle or greater tuberosity, and there is another tubercle which is named as lesser tubercle or lesser tuberosity. This is present on the anterior proximal end of the humerus. This is a roughened elevation, and it is present on the anterior proximal end of the humerus, inferior to the head. This is head, and inferior to the head there will be lesser tubercle, and it will be medial to the greater tubercle. So how will you determine the side of the humerus? See here, the head will come medially, the greater tubercle will come laterally, and the lesser tubercle will face anteriorly. Okay, so you will put the lesser tubercle anteriorly, and then you can see that of which side this humerus is, right side or left side. So lesser tubercle will come anteriorly, greater tubercle will face laterally, and head of the humerus will face medially. Now see here, there is the anatomical neck of the humerus, which is the slightly constricted region surrounding the articular surface of the head. See here, this is the anatomical neck of the humerus. This is anatomical neck of the humerus. It is present just below the humeral head. The articular capsule of the shoulder joint attaches along the inferior edge of the anatomical neck. Here the capsule of the shoulder joint is present. The surgical neck, can you see here? This is surgical neck of the humerus. It is a constricted area immediately inferior to the greater and the lesser tubercle. This form the interface between the proximal extremity and the shaft of the humerus. This is called as surgical neck of the humerus. So we have discussed the humerus head, the greater tuberosity, the lesser tuberosity, the anatomical neck, and the surgical neck of the humerus. The surgical neck of the humerus has an important relation with the axillary nerve. See here, this is very important point which you have to remember, that the surgical neck has important relation with the axillary nerve and the anterior and posterior circumflex humeral vessels. Remember this thing. Okay, fracture here are very common. The intertubercular bicipital groove. Can you see here? There is a groove on the anterior aspect of the proximal extremity. This groove is called as bicipital groove or the intertubercular groove. If you say intertubercular, why? Because it is in between the greater tubercle and the lesser tubercle. So it is intertubercular groove, or it is called as bicipital groove. Okay, because here the biceps muscle will cross. Okay, so this is bicipital groove. It is a deep groove on the anterior aspect of the humerus that separate the greater and the lesser tubercles. It houses the tendon of the long head of the biceps brachii muscle and extends into the upper third of the shaft of the humerus. See here, it is extending in the upper third of the shaft of the humerus. So this is intertubercular sulcus or the bicipital groove of the humerus. So we have studied the humeral head, the greater tubercle, the lesser tubercle, the intertubercular sulcus, the anatomical neck of the humerus, and the surgical neck of the humerus. Now we will discuss the body or the shaft of the humerus. There is a deltoid tuberosity. Can you see here in this diagram? This is a deltoid tuberosity. Delt as in the triangular Greek letter delta. Okay, so delt word comes from the word delta. It is a roughened triangular elevation on the anterior lateral surface of the mid shaft of the humerus. This deltoid tuberosity is present in the middle of the shaft. It is present on the anterior lateral surface. Okay, so it is facing laterally and anteriorly. This serves as the attachment area for the deltoid muscle. That's why it is called as deltoid tuberosity. The posterior edge of the tuberosity. See here, when we will see the tuberosity posteriorly, it defines the groove for the radial nerve. This is named as radial groove or the spiral groove because radial nerve passes through this groove. This is a groove or sulcus for the radial nerve. It is a shallow depression that spirals around the posterior and lateral aspect of the mid shaft of the humerus. This groove is more distinct where it lies between the deltoid tuberosity and the upper end of the lateral supracondylar ridge. Okay, so see here, this is the lateral supracondylar ridge and there is the deltoid tuberosity which is present on the anterior aspect. Okay, anterior and lateral aspect. So this is more distinct in between the deltoid tuberosity and the lateral supracondylar ridge. It has important relation with the radial nerve and the profunda brachii vessels. This is deep branch of the brachial artery. Profunda means deep and brachii vessels. Okay, it is a branch of the brachial artery which is the deep branch of the brachial artery. This question is also very, very important, that what are the important relations of the radial groove or which nerve or artery is present in the radial groove. So it is the radial nerve and the profunda brachii vessels which are present in the radial groove. Okay, fractures of the mid shaft of the humerus are very common, especially inferior to the deltoid tuberosity, and may affect the radial groove and its contents. See here in this diagram, this is proximal extremity, this is the shaft of the humerus, and this is the distal extremity of the humerus. In the proximal extremity, we have studied the head of the humerus, the lesser tubercle, the greater tubercle, the intertubercular sulcus, the anatomical neck of the humerus, and the surgical neck of the humerus. In the shaft of the humerus, up till now, we have discussed the deltoid tuberosity and we have discussed the radial groove in which the radial nerve and the profunda brachii vessels are present. Now we will discuss the distal extremity. There are two supracondylar ridges. Number one is medial supracondylar ridge and the other one is lateral supracondylar ridge. Why it is called as medial? Because it is present on the medial side and the lateral is present on the lateral side. What means the supracondylar or supraepicondylar ridge? See here, there are two epicondyles on the distal extremity of the humerus. One is medial epicondyle and one is lateral epicondyle. Okay, epicondyle means it is above the condyle. Okay, so it is medial epicondyle and lateral epicondyle. See here, above the medial epicondyle, there will be a ridge. That's why it is named as medial supraepicondylar ridge, because it is above. Supra means it is above the epicondyle. On the medial side, that's why it is named as medial supraepicondylar ridge. And on the lateral side, it is named as lateral supraepicondylar ridge. The medial supraepicondylar ridge is a narrow ridge running proximally from the medial epicondyle, forming the lower medial border of the humerus. And the lateral supracondylar ridge or supraepicondylar ridge is a narrow ridge running proximally from the lateral epicondyle and forming the lower lateral border of the humerus. Now the lateral epicondyle, see here, this is the lateral epicondyle, which is a small roughened projection on the distal lateral side of the humerus. It is proximal to the capitulum. See here, this is capitulum. So this lateral epicondyle, it is proximal to the capitulum. It is radially palpable. Okay, the common extensor tendon or tendon of the origin of several superficial forearm extensor muscles attaches here. Inflammation of this tendon is termed as lateral epicondylitis or tennis elbow. See here, again you will understand this thing. It is radially palpable condyle or epicondyle. Here all the extensor, this is common extensor origin, okay, or origin of all the common forearm extensor muscles which are attached here. Okay, sometimes there is inflammation of this tendon and it is named as lateral epicondylitis or tennis elbow. The medial epicondyle, see here, on the medial side there is a big epicondyle which is bigger than the lateral one, and it is a large knob-like projection on the distal medial side of the humerus proximal to the trochlea. Okay, the lateral epicondyle was proximal to the capitulum and the medial epicondyle is proximal to the trochlea. It is also easily palpable and it forms an important surface landmark in the arm. The ulnar nerve crosses the posterior surface of this epicondyle in the shallow ulnar sulcus. There is ulnar sulcus on the posterior aspect of the medial epicondyle and it is susceptible to injury here. Example, via the blunt trauma or the bony fracture. The nerve can be palpated here and rolled against the epicondyle. So remember this thing, that ulnar nerve is present on the posterior side of the medial epicondyle. Okay, ulnar nerve. Ulnar nerve is named as funny bone. Okay, stimulation of the ulnar nerve by contact against the epicondyle elicits the characteristic funny bone response of tingling sensation in the medial border of the hand and the fifth digit. Why it is called as funny? Funny bone is called funny because it borders on the humerus. That's why it is named as funny bone. So ulnar nerve is named as funny bone. Now there are two condyles which you have to study. See here, this is capitulum and on the medial side there is trochlea. Capitulum word comes from the capit, which means head. Okay, this is just like a little head, that's why it is named as capitulum. This capitulum and trochlea, they are condyles of the humerus. Above them there are epicondyles, because epi means above, so above the condyles there are epicondyles, and above the epicondyles there were supracondylar ridges, lateral supracondylar ridge and medial supracondylar ridge. So we will study the capitulum and the trochlea, which are the condyles of the humerus. The capitulum is a little head. It is a rounded, half spherical, articular process at the distal lateral end of the humerus. It lies immediately lateral to the trochlea. The capitulum articulates with the head of the radius. See here in this diagram, it is articulating with the head of the radius to form the elbow joint. The shape of these structures allow both flexion and extension and rotation at the humeroradial joint. So this is the capitulum of the humerus. The trochlea, see here, this is trochlea. Trochlea words come from the trochli, which is a Greek word which means pulley. So it is a pulley shaped articular process at the distal medial side of the humerus or medial end of the humerus. It lies immediately medial to the capitulum. The trochlea articulate with the trochlear notch of the ulna. See here, this trochlea, it is articulating with the trochlear notch of the ulna. The shape of the articulated trochlea and the trochlear notch plus the presence of the humeroradial joint limit the lateral movements of ulna, resulting in essentially a hinge action at the humero-ulnar joint. See here, this trochlea of the humerus is articulating with the trochlear notch of the ulna. At the distal extremity, we have studied the medial supracondylar ridge, lateral supracondylar ridge, medial epicondyle, lateral epicondyle, the capitulum on the lateral side, and trochlea on the medial side. Now we will discuss some more structures. The coronoid fossa. See here, this is coronoid fossa. It is a depression on the distal anterior end of the humerus, immediately proximal to the trochlea. This receives the coronoid process of the ulna when the elbow is fully flexed. See here, this is trochlea of the humerus and this is the trochlear notch of the ulna. Okay, so this is the trochlea and the trochlear notch of the ulna, and above the trochlea there is the coronoid fossa. This is the coronoid fossa which will articulate with the coronoid process of the ulna. This coronoid process of the ulna will fix here or will come here to be attached when the elbow is fully flexed. Okay, this is the radial fossa. This was coronoid fossa or coronoid space, and laterally there is radial fossa, and it is a shallow depression on the distal anterior end of the humerus, immediately proximal to the capitulum. This receives the margin of the head of the radius. See here, this head of the radius will articulate with this radial fossa. That's why it is named as radial fossa, because of the head of the radius will articulate here or will come here in this fossa when the elbow is fully flexed. Okay, this was coronoid fossa because the coronoid process of the ulna will come here when the elbow is fully flexed, and this is radial fossa because the head of the radius will come here when the elbow is fully flexed. So we have discussed the lateral supracondyle, lateral epicondyle, laterally we have capitulum, then medial supracondyle, ridge, and the medial epicondyle, and the medial condyle which is trochlea, and above there are two fossae which are present on the anterior surface. Laterally we have radial fossa and medially we have coronoid fossa. Remember this thing, laterally we have radial fossa because of the head of the radius will come here, and medially we have the coronoid fossa because the coronoid process of the ulna will come here when elbow is fully flexed. Then there is olecranon fossa. This olecranon fossa is a deep depression on the distal posterior end of the humerus. The radial fossa and the coronoid fossa were present anteriorly, and the olecranon fossa is present posteriorly. It is immediately proximal to the trochlea. This holds the apex of the olecranon process of the elbow of the ulna when the elbow is extended. Remember this thing, when the elbow is extended, there are two processes in the ulna. One is coronoid process, which is present anteriorly, and one is olecranon process, which is present posteriorly. And when the elbow is fully extended, this olecranon process of the ulna will come in this olecranon fossa of the humerus. This thing is very, very important, okay? And then when the elbow is fully flexed, the two structures, which are the coronoid process of the ulna and the head of the radius, they will articulate in the coronoid fossa of the humerus and the radial fossa of the humerus respectively. But when the elbow is fully extended, the olecranon process of the ulna will be present in the olecranon fossa of the humerus. See here in this diagram, you can see, again I will repeat all structures which are present distally. There is lateral epicondylar ridge, medial supracondylar ridge, and lateral supracondylar ridge. Then there is lateral epicondyle and medial epicondyle. Then there are two condyles of the humerus which are present distally. Laterally we have capitulum and medially we have trochlea. Okay, above the trochlea or proximal to the trochlea we have coronoid fossa, and proximal to the capitulum we have radial fossa. Posteriorly we have the olecranon fossa, which is present on the posterior side, okay, above the trochlea. Now some of the clinical applications. Number one is humeral head fracture. See here, head of the humerus can be fractured and it occurs during the process of the anterior and posterior dislocations of the shoulder joint. The fibrocartilaginous glenoid labrum, which is present on the glenoid cavity of the scapula, produces the fracture, and the labrum can become jammed in this defect, making reduction of the shoulder joint difficult. Okay, so head of the humerus can be fractured. See here, the proximal end of the humerus can be fractured. This is the proximal end of the humerus. Okay, this is the proximal end, so it can be fractured at the surgical neck of the humerus, at the greater tuberosity, at the head of the humerus, or at the anatomical neck of the humerus. The greater tuberosity or the greater tubercle of the humerus can be fractured by direct trauma, displaced by the glenoid labrum during dislocation of the shoulder joint, or reversed by the violent contractions of the supraspinatus muscle. Lesser tuberosity of the humerus can be fractured and it accompanies the posterior dislocation of the shoulder joint. The bone fragment receives the insertion of the subscapularis tendon, which is a part of the rotator cuff. The surgical neck of the humerus can be fractured. See here, the surgical neck of the humerus, which lies immediately distal to the lesser tuberosity, can be fractured by the direct blow on the lateral aspect of the shoulder, or in the indirect trauma by falling on the outstretched hand. The axillary nerve and the circumflex humeral blood vessels have very close relation to the surgical neck, and they can be readily damaged in association with the fracture here. So you have to remember the relation of the surgical neck of the humerus and the axillary nerve and the circumflex humeral vessels, which are anterior circumflex humeral artery and posterior circumflex humeral artery. See here in this diagram, this type of fracture is called as the transverse humeral shaft fracture. Then there can be oblique humeral shaft fracture. There can be spiral fracture. There can be comminuted fracture, in which there are many pieces of the bone are there. Then there can be segmental fractures. Two segments are fractured in the shaft of the humerus. Shaft of the humerus can be fractured, which are very, very common. Displacement of the fragments on the relation of the site of the fracture to the insertion of the deltoid muscle. When the fracture line is proximal to the deltoid insertion, the pectoralis major muscle, the latissimus dorsi, and the teres major muscle adduct the proximal fragment. The deltoid, the biceps and the triceps pull the distal fragment proximally. When the fracture is distal to the deltoid insertion, then the proximal fragment is abducted by the deltoid and the biceps and the triceps pull the distal fragment proximally. The radial nerve can be damaged where it lies in the spiral groove on the posterior surface of the humerus under the cover of the triceps muscle. So this is very, very important. We should know that the spiral groove has very important relation with the radial nerve. So the radial nerve can be damaged here. Distal end of the humerus can be fractured. Supracondylar fractures are very common in children and they occur when the child falls on the outstretched hand with the elbow partially flexed, or injuries to the median nerve, the radial nerve and the ulnar nerve are not uncommon, although function usually quicks return after reduction of the fracture. Damage to or pressure on the brachial artery can occur at the time of the fracture or from the swelling of the surrounding tissues. The circulation to the forearm may be interfered with, leading to the Volkmann ischemic contracture, which is a permanent shortening of the forearm muscles, usually resulting from the injury that gave rise to the claw-like deformity of the hand, fingers, and the wrist. The medial collateral ligament of the elbow can avulse the medial epicondyle if the forearm is forcibly abducted. The ulnar nerve can be injured at the time of this fracture because the ulnar nerve has very important relation with the posterior surface of the medial epicondyle. See here, this is very important slide. The following parts of the humerus are in direct contact with the indicated nerve. See here, this is the surgical neck of the humerus. Here the axillary nerve is present and anterior and posterior circumflex humeral vessels are present. So if there is fracture of the surgical neck, there will be potential damage to the axillary nerve and posterior circumflex humeral vessels. Then there is the radial groove, which is very close relation with the radial nerve and the profunda brachii vessel. So if there is a mid-shaft fracture, so there will be potential damage to the radial nerve and the profunda brachii vessel. Then there is the distal end of the humerus is closely related with the median nerve. See here, this is median nerve which is present anteriorly on the distal end of the humerus. Then medial epicondyle. See here, if there is a fracture of the medial epicondyle, so there will be fracture, damage to the ulnar nerve and the ulnar collateral artery. Okay, so this is also very important. Along with the median nerve, there can be damage to the brachial artery. See here, this is also the mid-shaft fracture which is causing damage to the radial nerve. Okay, so this is mid-shaft fracture. Now there are some muscles which are attached to the upper end and the lower end and the shaft of the humerus. First of all, subscapularis, it is attached to the lesser tubercle. See here, this is subscapularis muscle. Subscapularis muscle. Okay, then there will be on the greater tubercle, there are three muscles which are attached. One is supraspinatus, which is attached to the upper impression, then infraspinatus, which is attached to the middle impression, and the teres minor muscle, which is attached to the lower impression or the inferior impression on the greater tubercle. There are three muscles which are attached to the greater tubercle: supraspinatus, infraspinatus, and the teres minor muscle. Then in the bicipital groove, we have three muscles. Okay, one is attached to the medial lip, one is attached to the lateral lip. Okay, and one muscle is attached in the floor of the intertubercular sulcus. Number one is teres major muscle, which is attached to the medial lip of the intertubercular sulcus. Then the pectoralis major muscle, which is attached to the lateral lip of the intertubercular sulcus, and the latissimus dorsi, which is present in the floor of the bicipital groove. So three muscles which are attached on the anterior surface of the upper part of the shaft of the humerus. There is bicipital groove, which is also called as intertubercular sulcus, teres major muscle, pectoralis major muscle, and latissimus dorsi in the floor. Teres major to the medial lip, pectoralis major to the lateral lip, and in the latissimus dorsi to the floor of the bicipital groove. Then there is the lateral head of the triceps muscle, which is attached or posteriorly on the upper part of the shaft of the humerus. Okay, then deltoid muscle is attached to the deltoid tuberosity, and coracobrachialis is also attached to the medial part of the middle end of the shaft of the humerus. Middle part of the shaft of the humerus. Brachialis is also attached on the lower part of the shaft of the humerus. Okay, then there is the medial epicondyle, which is common flexor origin. All flexor muscles of the forearm are originated from the common flexor origin, which is medial epicondyle. And lateral epicondyle is common extensor origin, because all extensor muscles of the forearm are attached here. Okay, then the brachioradialis muscle, which is present on the lateral supracondylar ridge. Okay, lateral supracondylar ridge. But the extensor muscle, just like the extensor carpi radialis longus, it is attached to the lateral epicondyle. And pronator teres is also a flexor. It is attached to the medial epicondyle. It is originated from here. The medial head of the triceps, it is attached on the posterior aspect of the lower end of the shaft of the humerus. And the anconeus muscle, it is attached on the posterior part of the lateral epicondyle. Okay, so this is lateral epicondyle, and coneus muscle is attached here. So these are some of the muscles which are attached to the humerus. I hope you understand the humerus lecture. Thank you very much.